And at this time, I'd like to quickly introduce our speakers for today. We have Jess Shear and Stephen Troy. IOFM editor Jess Shear is an award-winning business reporter focused on the intersection of accounting, finance, and management. Before joining IOFM, Jess spent 5 years as a process consultant, helping organizations more effectively and efficiently manage end-to-end processes, including procure-to-pay and order-to-cash. Stephen Troy is an accomplished business executive, lecturer, author, and founder and CEO of AeroPay Express, Inc. and AeroFund Financial, a 33-year-old finance company. Mr. Troy, an early pay authority, has established AeroPay Express as the go-to platform for buyers and sellers looking to benefit from early pay. And at this time, I would like to welcome our speakers and hand the presentation off to Jeff.
Thank you so much, Laura, and thank you for joining us. As the executive editor at IOFM, I give hundreds of speeches a year, and typically when I talk about early pay discounts, it's in the context of the carrot at the end of this incredibly long journey. It's the incentive at the end for fixing your processes and identifying where process efficiency and training isn't enough, where you need automation, and then you sell your senior leaders on automation, and eventually you pick and choose a vendor, and eventually you install and implement something, and eventually you train your staff, and eventually you're efficient enough to be able to go to procurement to negotiate early pay discounts, and eventually you're able to capture enough of those early pay discounts that one day you're able to capture enough that you can convert AP from a cost center to a profit center. And it's not that that long journey that's measured in years isn't correct. It's that there's actually a faster way to get there. Last October, I met Stephen for the first time, and he shared with me that his organization essentially finances early pay discounts, and then depending upon how fast you pay him back for those early pay invoices that he pays, he reimburses you based on a sliding scale. And to me, that was a game changer. It means a couple things. It meant that first and foremost, there's some early pay discounts you can capture right away. Number two, it means that you no longer had to wait to go through this long journey before you're able to go to procurement and make a test case and a business case for justifying early pay discounts, or going to your boss's boss to justify automation. You can start to see those efficiencies right away and to help generate the reality of that business case. And three, you're able to build relationships and improve relationships with vendors. Everything we do on the AP side of the shop, we also do for the AR side. And I can tell you vendors are eager, not just willing, but eager to get paid, and if a 2% discount is not a problem in order to get paid early. And so what Stephen described to me was nothing short of a game changer from my perspective. And so very eager to have this conversation. Because this is a new concept for a lot of us, I think there's typically 5 broad misconceptions that I know Stephen had to walk me through. I think that's probably a good place for you to start, Stephen. If you could share those 5 common early pay myths, and then dig deeper into what you provide. I think that would be a great way to extend our conversation this morning.
Great. Thank you for the introduction. Yes, there are 5 early pay myths that I've heard consistently over the past 3 years. The first one being, my vendor does not give early pay discounts. Well, the truth is, businesses give early pay discounts all the time. If they take a credit card, they are paying a discount to get paid early and not provide 30-day terms. So this is just an extension of the credit card industry, where somebody will give a discount to get that cash flow moving faster. And of course, it also depends on the size of the company. Some companies have a much easier time stretching out, working with their cash flow than others. Another myth is, I've asked my vendor for early pay discounts and they've refused. Getting early pay discounts really depends on who you talk to, when you talk to them, what size company you're talking to. There are many different factors we've found with companies accepting early pay discount. Obviously, if you go to an AT&T, it would be hard to find someone to even talk about an early pay discount. But if you go to a smaller organization and you get to the right person, you can usually get the early pay discounts, and they're usually eager for them. Another myth was I was told that I have to have full automation before I take advantage of early pay discounts. Well, that's not true. Technology and cloud computing and services like ours have allowed outsourcing of early pay discounts with just a simple file transfer from an ERP to us will get you into early pay almost immediately. We can set somebody up within 7 to 10 days. I will upset my vendor relationship if I ask for early pay discounts. Well, that's not exactly true. Chances are many of your vendors are just hoping you call them up and offer to pay them early. So this is actually not something you're forcing them to do. This is something that is a benefit that's offering to them. So when we call a vendor up, we say, here's a new benefit. If you would like to get paid early, this is the program. If you don't and you want to wait 30, 60, 90 days, that's fine too. So this is really a benefit to any vendor that's out there. So it should enhance your relationship with your vendors. Early paying vendors will strain my cash flow. Well, that could be true. Services like ours, where we actually pay the money and allow you to pay us back at different varying times, means that you can actually stretch out those payments to us and still get some early pay discounts. But there are other options, and we'll talk about that later, of how we can actually improve your cash flow using early pay discounts. Do I have the – I am not moving my – there we go. I'm sorry. Industry metrics. Early pay is accepted by 20% of vendors who are offered early pay discounts. Virtual card is about 8 to 10% in adoption of virtual card if you're doing a virtual card now, and the average time to pay invoices is about 67 days. 52% of businesses actually ask for extended terms. Now, the 67 days, you'll find this is actually expanding, not contracting. So we're seeing companies that are going 90 days, 120. We have one buyer who is paying 180 days to their vendors. Here's the problem that buyers find themselves in. First off, they're losing opportunity. For every $1 billion in spend, there are more than $3 million worth of early pay opportunities out there that you can capture. There's also a resource gap. The bandwidth to be able to go out and find the right person, find the vendor, know what vendors to talk to. It can get very discouraging if you just shotgun out there and try to send a blast emails asking for early pay discounts. It is something that takes days, weeks, months, sometimes over a year before a vendor gets the benefit of an early pay discount. Internal agility. There's also a lack of systems that people don't have in place to take early pay discounts. And there's also the fact that many organizations, the buyers, don't have the confidence that the organization can actually take advantage of the discounts if they are actually granted to them. And also early pay can interfere with cash flow, so people are concerned with that. The solution? Find a partner like AeroPay Express that can go out there and uncover those discounts. A partner can go out there, and that's their expertise. We actually have been in business for 33 years. All we have done is talk to vendors and buyers and learned what they need and what their cash flow needs are. It is our core competency. We have been successful in doing this time and time again to get vendors to identify the right person and the right organization to get early pay discounts. We also create agility because you have the ability to pay outside the company and also extend possible those terms. So we have flexible payment options. If you need to take longer to pay the bill, we've actually paid within 24 hours of when an approval happens, and you can pay us in a week, 2 weeks, a month, 30 days, 45 days, even 60 days or longer. Why do vendors accept Early Pay Express? The vendor problem is they have a capital lockdown. If they're offering 30, 60, and if you saw 67 days on average or 90-day terms to buyers, that really ties up a lot of their capital. In many cases, they can borrow, but still they would need a considerable amount of equity to cover invoices that are longer. It's also expensive for them to do it. If they go out to find lenders such as a bank or a asset-based lender or maybe a factor, it can increase their cost of doing business with you quite a bit. And the longer receivables go out, the less likely is they can actually borrow on those receivables. You get over 90 days, and most lenders will not allow borrowing on the receivables. It is also important that vendors get paid and get paid quickly. The worst thing that can happen to a vendor is to offer you an early pay discount and then sometimes get paid early, sometimes it takes a longer time to get paid. Vendors want consistency. If they give you an early pay discount, they want to make sure they get paid on time, every time. The worst thing can also happen is that you pay them in 30 days, they gave you a discount, you take the discount anyway. And we've seen that happen, and that really is a problem for the supply chain. So we make sure that the vendors are paid consistently and you have the time and leisure to make the early pay work for you. Here's an idea of the cost of a company financing their accounts receivable. If someone had a bank financing, which is a good quality customer, a vendor who can borrow from a bank, typically they're borrowing all in around 6% right now. That's a cost of about 0.5% a month. If they have an asset-based lender, if they can't go to a bank, an asset-based lender is going to be between 12 and 15%, and that's about 1.2% per month. Factoring, that can be 26 to 32%. To pay a factor, that's 2.4% a month. Now remember, even on these rates, financial institutions will only advance 7 to 80% on the AR, which means that the vendor has to come up with 20% of the money on their own. So they can tie up 20 to 30% of their capital just financing the receivables. They also have an issue with it's time consuming. There's a lot of documentation when you have to send to the bank and ask for a draw on your accounts receivable credit line. So let's see what happens to an invoice. Assuming 60 days, and we mentioned that the average is 67 days, bank financing is costing about 1% of the cost of that invoice. Asset-based lending results in 2.4% of that invoice amount is going to a bank. Factoring, it could be close to 5% of that invoice amount will be going to a financial institution. So the average cost, if we take that all together, is about 3%, or for every $100,000, there's 3% of hidden value that can go to you, because it costs about $3,000 to finance one invoice for a buyer. If it goes to 90, that goes up even higher. The company I said that pays in 180, that goes even more. So where does it make sense? Large organizations, chances are not going to take an early pay discount, but some do offer them. I know in the confection area, the candy industry, they offer discounts, large suppliers. But as you get to the smaller vendors, they will be more likely to take an early pay discount. How do you know which of the small vendors? That's what we do. We can actually go on public records and find out how large a company is, who they bank with, what size bank do they have, what kind of financial institution are they, with an asset-based lender, a factor, or do they not have financing at all? This is all information that we can find online and with systems that we have. So here's a way that you can actually make your cash flow go further. Right now, as I had mentioned, certain companies are waiting 120, 150, 180 days to get paid. You can imagine how that stresses the supply chain. The Fortune 500, though, realized they borrow money very, very cheaply. So if they go to their vendors and say, we're going to stretch the payable terms to 120 days, but guess what? We're going to give you the option to get paid in 24 hours if you give us a small discount. That has become a very, very high profit center for the businesses, for the Fortune 500. They are paying more and more companies, giving them the relief of early pay. And of course, the longer they stretch out, more people drop into the early pay bucket. So when you look at 20% of the companies are accepting early pay, 80% are not accepting early pay, so they're being stretched out longer. Why is the answer AeroPay Express? AeroPay Express, we can pay anyone, anywhere in the world, domestic or international. Whether you're buying from China or you're buying from France, the UK, anywhere in the world, or domestically, we can capture those early pay discounts for you. A matter of fact, internationally, they're probably more likely to take an early pay discount because they don't want to give terms, and they also worry about credit risk. And if somebody doesn't pay, it is very difficult to go from the UK to the United States to try to collect your money. So early pay has become a very big thing, and also the cost of doing international transactions with letters of credit and other paperwork. Early pay simplifies and cuts down costs in the international world. And of course, domestically, you're seeing many, many small businesses looking to early pay to get their cash flow moving because they're getting more money than they would from a financial institution. Also, we're meeting the financial needs of both the buyer and the seller. We don't go out and just broadcast to vendors. We actually talk to the vendors and we talk to the buyers to try to figure out what exactly they're trying to accomplish. Do they want longer terms? Do they want make more money in rebates? Can the seller wait, maybe not get paid in 24 hours, but can they do a smaller discount if they get paid in 14 days? We actually work, and each program is individually tailored to the buyer and the seller. We also give monthly cashback rewards to the buyers. Virtual cards typically don't give rewards on a monthly basis. They do them quarterly. We've even seen them annually on reward backs. We actually give cash back every single month, and we can do it two ways. We can have the invoice paid in full and send a rebate check, or it can actually be deducted right from the invoice when the money is paid back to us. We also have simplified onboarding. Being that we do everything, it is very easy to get your organization onto AeroPay Express. We only require one download of a file that can go into the cloud, and we take it from there. So there's no integration that has to be done with the ERP. Everything we do is very, very simple with a simple transfer, and we have many different methods to actually get that file. AeroPay Express advantage, 30 years of dealing with vendors and buyers, working with their cash flow, financing those receivables, helping buy internationally. So all our team does on the phone all day long is work with vendors and with buyers. Our team, our average person has been on our team for about 7 years. So they know how to talk to everybody and the vendors and know how to find those discounts for you. We do the outreach and negotiation. Once you sign up with us, you give us a vendor list. We take it from there by contacting in many different touch points all of the vendors and find out which ones can give an early pay discounts, which ones will not give an early pay discounts, and we work that list from the day one to consistently throughout the year to find the right person to talk to. We also give flexible discount programs. As I said, the average is just 2%. We've done a little bit less based on people getting paid a little bit later, and we've done a little bit more where people want to have longer terms, and the vendor is willing to pick that up. So the buyer can decide between extended terms and maximum cash back, or they can get both. Maybe you decide that you want to pay us back in a week and get the maximum discounts. Maybe you're seasonal and another time of the month you say, you know, we want to pay this in 30 days. We want to pay this in 45 days. That's not a problem. We vary our rebates back to you based on when you pay your bill. International benefits, as I had mentioned, we eliminate the need for costly letters of credit. That can run 2% just on its own. We also eliminate the currency risk that can happen. If you get 30, 60, or 90 days from an international buyer, you're going to have to buy a hedge to make sure that if they bill you in their currency, that bill is going to be what you expect when the time comes to pay it. With paying early, We eliminate the risk of fluctuation, so you don't need a hedge or a forward. And we can also provide extended terms. This becomes very important as the shift of the supply chain is moving out of China. It's going into smaller and smaller areas, countries that are not equipped with the financial resources to actually even give terms to buyers. And they also don't have the depth to understand which buyers are the best buyers to give credit to. So early pay has become a very big thing in Malaysia, in Vietnam, and other countries like that who are now getting a transfer from China of the supply chain. And we can provide thousands, hundreds of thousands, even millions in early pay rebates. We can also pay in most countries of the world. If somebody in the UK wants to get paid in euros, that's not a problem. Somebody wants to get pesos, that's not a problem. Yuan, that's not a problem. We can pay in any currency anywhere in the world. So here's something we do also. We have an e-payment system. As long as your spend is over $1 million, we can provide you a one payment file where you transfer one file into the cloud, and then we take all of that data of the vendors, how they want to get paid. We contact them to say, do you want to get paid by virtual card? Do you want to get paid by ACH transfer? Do you still want a paper check? Of course, we try to move those over to e-payments. We also do global payments and also current exchange. We do the early pay. So we do it all for you. All you have to do, so you no longer have to buy checks, print checks, sign checks. You don't have to upload files into your system to pay by ACH. We handle all that for you. It's a complete e-payment system. So let's see how much money could be in an early pay program if you put one on. The vendors that are likely to accept early pay, vendors that have no financing, couldn't get bank financing, they may be with an asset-based lender, they may be with a factor, or a community bank, or they're an international seller. All those we can identify and go for them for early pay. So let's look at a mid-cap company that's doing $200 million in third-party spend. That might be under or might be over what you have, but you can just divide those numbers as you see fit. With $200 million, we expect that we'll get $40 million of early pay acceptance. With an average rebate of 1.1%, the opportunity is $440,000 in early pay rebates. That's close to $500,000. When you add in a virtual card program, which is we say about a 9% adoption rate, that can add another $200,000 to your bottom line. A total, almost $640,000 in total annual opportunity that goes right to the bottom line, and you had zero expense against that. You didn't have to have a staff calling on the vendors to ask for discounts. You didn't have to, put up any money to do that. It is simply money that goes to the bottom line. Let's say you're a larger company, $1.5 billion in third-party spend, and this is actually a customer we have. $300 million in early pay acceptance, 1.1% in rebates, $3.3 million in early pay rebates, coupled with the virtual card at almost $500,000, close to $5 million for a company that's doing $1.5 billion in spend. This actually makes a difference on the bottom line. So Early Pay Express, why we're your partner? We're a single payment solution. We give maximum cash back. We have extended terms should you need them. There is no system integration. There is zero cost. We are aligned with you. If we don't work for you and get early pay working for your organization, we don't make any money. We are not asking for any annual payments. We're not asking for any upfront money. We are aligned with you. We make money, and you make money. So if there's any questions, I think that we've come to the end here.
Thank you, Stephen. number of things. We already have some questions in, but just want to remind you there's a chat feature in the bottom of your screen, so please add additional questions there, and we will get to as many as we have time for today. Stephen, a couple questions have already come in. One is, if the organization takes a very long time to approve invoices, does that still make it possible to get vendors to accept early pay discounts?
Oh, absolutely. The longer it takes to approve an invoice, usually it's because there's no incentive to actually approve anything faster. Most people think that paying a bill is going to cost them money. But if all of a sudden the organization realizes that if I take an early pay, if there's early pay discounts out there in the thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, believe me, the organization is going to move faster to approve those invoices. They're not going to drag their feet because this becomes a profit center. So, and also, if some organizations actually do have, even with the automation, have a longer cycle, but that even helps the early pay work even better because somebody will get paid 24 hours after approval, and they still don't have to wait the 30, 60, or 90 days to get paid. So it doesn't really matter, but there is an incentive for the organization doing the early pay much, much quicker.
And that incentive, I think, is a really interesting point. I think one of the challenges that organizations face is that organizations of all kinds, every industry employs what I call special people, right? The people that are too special to process and approve their invoices. But if you can show that there's a financial cost for sitting on the approval or financial benefit for going in and checking approvals more quickly, I think that is huge. One of the things that we see organizations doing from a metric perspective is tracing back where the delays are, right? Is it, are you able to have the visibility to understand either what departments or perhaps which managers or which individuals are causing those delays? And now there's a real number that you can tie to it. So I think utilizing the approach you just described can really help overcome what I think is a pretty common but sometimes what seems to be an impenetrable challenge inside of an organization to get those special people to approve invoices. Another question that's come in: what's required from the vendor to accept early pay discounts?
That's actually quite simple from the vendor. We have a very short half-page document that they sign that says that when they get paid their early pay payment, that is payment in full. They are done. So we're not asking for any voluminous documentation from the vendor, and we also don't ask that from the buyer. Our buyer contract is a simple, easy-to-read 3 pages. It simply says, when you approve an invoice and you send it in the cloud for us to pay it, once we pay it, you have to pay us back 100% of that invoice, and based on when you pay us is how much money we're going to rebate back to you out of that invoice. So we make the documentation very simple for both.
Interesting, because I think that's, again, helps to overcome another challenge I see a lot of organizations face, which is a lot of organizations have set up vendor portals. Again, not a easy, inexpensive, or quick fix, but it's how they think they need to be able to capture the data so they can process it more efficiently. And what I'm hearing you say, and please let me know if I'm mishearing or misstating, is that you can also help the vendors sidestep that hurdle as well by once you reach out to them, you do all the outreach. It's not a matter of them having to log into the AP department's vendor portal. Because the challenge often is that if a company is working with, selling their products to 100 different companies as the vendor, they're having to log into 100 different vendor portals. More convenient for us, more of a challenge for them. And it sounds like your process helps to sidestep that a bit.
Most definitely. Once we identify a vendor that wants to give an early pay discount, we provide that information to the buyer, and the buyer will put it in their system as a net one payment. It's as simple as when the next payment run comes out, that file will come to us. We'll identify by customer number who is the early pay payment, and we will just automatically pay them. Yes, there is very much happening portal fatigue out there, where so many vendors are going, they don't even want to go anymore. They sort of just kind of wait until they get paid. So once they sign up for the early pay, it is just a simple, when a check run happens, they're going to get paid.
So that brings us to the next two questions, which are both timing questions. So how quickly can vendors get paid? How quickly can AP departments expect to get their rebate from you guys?
As I said, we will pay within 24 hours of getting the file from the buyer that this vendor has an invoice for early pay. So when a bill goes in, obviously it'll go into ones who don't accept early pay, it'll go into net 30. So those will wait 30 days as check runs come out, and the 30-day hits, it'll come out, or at 60, it'll come out. With us, it's net 1. Once it comes out with that check run, they get paid within 24 hours. So the second part of the question was
then how quickly can the AP department get their rebate? So once they pay you, they reimburse you for that payment. How quickly does that rebate get cut to them?
Sure. We pay monthly, so we pay on the first of every month. Any rebates due to any of our customers gets paid.
It's an incredible turnaround. I think a lot of challenges that folks are facing is trying to justify an expense, and so you address that issue. The other part is the extent to which this improves vendor relationships. I think you raised 2 points earlier that I just wanted to build on, because I think it goes to your last answer, which is if you're setting up an expectation, if you're negotiating early pay discounts, then you're setting up an implicit expectation with that vendor that they're going to pay them early, right? Otherwise, procurement wouldn't have gone to the trouble of negotiating that in the first place. So if they negotiate it, but then you say, well, we wanted to go ahead and negotiate it, but we're not really in a position yet. We think one day maybe we might be able to pay you early. It damages that relationship a bit, and certainly makes it less likely that they're going to agree to early pay discounts in the future. It's something that they feel like, there was an expectation unmet. But this sounds like something where you're able to start negotiating those early pay discounts immediately and build upon those vendor relationships, improve those customer service roles within AP virtually immediately. You said set up as a week and then payment in a day, which is, I don't know of any other system in which there's, an 8-day turnaround from, say, automation that might boost efficiency. This changes that dynamic pretty significantly. And any feedback from the customers that you've worked with in terms of the feedback from the vendors and the effect that has on the vendor relationship?
Yes, I mean, as I mentioned, vendors want consistency. They want to make sure that when they sell the goods, if they've given a discount, that the payments are coming on a regular basis. We've actually found other companies who are doing the early pays themselves, and they will take advantage of an early pay discount and pay within maybe 4, 5, or 10 days, and then the next payment will come out in 30 days, and they'll still take the discount. That just drives vendors crazy, because obviously they have now a balance on their books, and it really becomes a strain between trying to collect that discount or saying, I'm going to write that off, and then they're going to say they want to build this discount to the next invoice. It becomes a real problem for vendors if they don't see consistency.
Absolutely. We're getting some additional questions. So again, would suggest if you have any questions, please add them to the chat window on your screen. One of our attendees is asking how your service differs from traditional factoring.
Oh, we're much different than factoring. First off, factoring, we would be going to the vendor. We would actually have a secured transaction with them. We would have to check them out, make sure we're the secured party. We would then have to send a notice to the buyer and tell the buyer that they have to pay us and not pay the vendor. It's much more intrusive in that. And also we will provide the vendor maybe 80% of the money up front, and then we will try to collect from the buyer. Ours is entirely different. We are trying to put factors out of business in that we go to a buyer, we give them a credit line, and we just tell them when the bill comes, just pay the vendor. There's no need for the vendor to actually finance their receivables. They don't need a factor. One, it's cheaper for them if they just take a short 2% discount. They're getting more money up front. It's an unsecured transaction for both the buyer and the seller. We also, there's a elimination of credit risk on the part of the vendor. So if something happens to the buyer, the vendor got paid. So we are actually the exact opposite of factoring.
Thanks. I think, because this is a relatively new concept for a lot of organizations, I think the only exposure has been factoring. I think that's a good way of distinguishing what traditional factoring groups do versus what you guys are doing. I think that the talk about international transactions also piques some interest. We have at least one question as I'm going through the list now that's looking for some greater clarification there, especially around the exchange rate piece. I think the point that you made is incredibly important in that if there's a 30, 60, 90 plus turnaround between payment, who knows what the exchange rate is, and that creates headaches. But can you give us a sense of what the exchange rate is versus that you guys use versus normal banking exchanges, or is it the same exchange rate?
Well, hopefully it's cheaper for the vendor using our exchange rate. We get a wholesale rate through Barclays Bank, and we can either we can actually add value to that, or we can either keep it lower, or we can adjust the rate. It should be actually cheaper for the vendor to use our currency exchange, unless you're a big user with a bank. Your exchange rate tends to be quite high. With our volume that goes out, we can get a wholesale rate the same as what the bank is getting and pass that on to customers. So we can actually even save money by using a currency exchange.
And relieve the headache of international payments. If you're a company that doesn't do a lot of international payments, this sounds like another headache that can be relieved. I think that's a significant value you're describing here. Another attendee on the line is asking about what size company you would need to be to work with you guys. Is there? You mentioned in an earlier slide you listed the big whales, big Fortune 500 companies that are working with you guys. Is there a company that's too small to work with you guys? Is there a sweet spot?
Well, we try to get companies that are doing about $50 million in revenue, for the program. If you get smaller than that, we can definitely do smaller. We've done as low as $20 million in revenue. The only problem there is sometimes there's not as much value to gain out of early pay as there is for the larger companies. As you can see from even a mid cap company or a large cap company, there's a difference there of about $4.5 million. So you can see the differences there. But it's really, for us, it's the quality of the customer, of the buyer, as opposed to the size of the buyer. So our systems, we have very different types of systems that will let us to put in companies that are even as small as $20 million in revenue.
And that's the AP department size, right? We're not talking about the vendor size.
That's correct.
That's interesting because I think, yeah. So I think there's a number of opportunities on the big companies where there are millions and millions of dollars in early pay discounts. I hate to say at risk, but often being left on the table. I think this is an opportunity to capture a bigger piece of that than they have before for a number of reasons. And then on the smaller end, I think there's an opportunity for organizations that, at $20 million, you may not have the invoice volume, $20 million in revenue. You may not have the invoice volume to justify automation, and therefore, when we talk about things like early pay discounts, that becomes a fantasy, right? That's so far afield from what you think your focus is, because you probably have a relatively small AP department, might be 1.5, 2 people, hopefully at least 2 people for segregation of duties, but it's a relatively small finance team, and early pay discounts historically have been the opportunity for the bigger players. And so to be able to level the playing field and create those opportunities is huge. You know, we couched this presentation in the context of converting your AP department from a cost center to a profit center. And, you know, certainly if you're only trying to offset the salaries and expenses of a couple of employees, it doesn't take a ton of 2% discounts to turn that. You know, I've seen the sort of the rule of thumb I've seen historically is about $3 million in early pay discounts every $1 billion in PO spend. And so, you know, I think that is fairly consistent with what you're seeing, and certainly is an opportunity for, you know, small and mid-sized players, not just the large AP departments that were referenced on one of the slides. Okay, we're getting a couple questions about sort of how the file processing works. So if I send you a file of all invoices approved for payment, how does our ERP get updated and reconciled with the actual pay date that you negotiate with each of the vendors?
Sure, it's a full automated e-payment system where once we pay everybody, there'll be a file that goes back up, and there's also the ability to go online to actually look at how everything has been paid. So we do have full transparency there, and the file goes back up to the ERP. We just have to find out what file format you need, but that's what the tech people in our e-payment solution do to find out, you know, what system you have, what you need to get updated, that information. E-payment has been a very, very big area, you know, for several years now, but typically for just virtual cards. So many of your listeners here might be more familiar with e-payment system on their virtual cards. We are actually working with a number of e-payment companies who are adding not only virtual card, but adding our early pay system to the offering to their customers. So there is the ability to get back and get the ERP totally automated and updated with that information. And there's another thing we have too, is we have customer service that if there's a question about any payments, those questions can come to us and we can answer about how people were paid, when they were paid, and that. So we can actually alleviate some pressure off the accounts payable department.
Are there any ERP systems that you integrate really well with? Any that you're not quite integrated with yet, or is it simply because it's a file that can be upgraded into any system, and therefore you're relatively agnostic when it comes to ERP integration?
It can be any system because it just becomes a file that gets uploaded. That's the beauty of what we do. We didn't go the direction where some companies who have software actually integrate in the ERP. There are several issues with that. There are issues with, first off, the time and cost. It could take 6, 9 months, a year, and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to integrate into an ERP. And also you have to get the tech departments involved. You have to get the CEO involved. There's a lot that goes on in this. Making this a simple process of, you know, AP department sending us a file in the cloud, it eliminates all of that.
That's a huge deal because a lot of folks are either in the process of changing ERPs, upgrading their ERP systems, unsure what their ERP system might be in 5 or 10 years, and so are reluctant to invest in anything that might get outdated. And what I'm hearing you say, and again, you know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like your services would work regardless of where their IT system takes the organization going forward, right? If they're on Oracle now and they're going to SAP or vice versa, or they're looking at different versions, moving from the cloud, moving from on-site, on-premises to a cloud-based system, they're worried about how it would integrate with all the other things that they've plugged in over time. But what I'm hearing you say is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you use today. It doesn't matter what you use tomorrow, because it's just a file that's going to be updated and can be read and integrated by any system.
Exactly.
Is that fair? Okay.
We can go if somebody's using Outlook today. I mean, and their organization grows, and they want to go to SAP or Oracle. It's just it doesn't matter to us. It is true if you have say Oracle and you're switching to SAP. You have to go through this whole process again, and it takes a long time to get these systems, especially, and also a headache. And the last thing you want to hear about is how to integrate your virtual card in your early pay system, and get the AP department involved with the tech department. Getting a file out of the system, going to us, keeps that consistency to the vendor that they know they can get paid each and every time they send an invoice, and it doesn't matter what system that the buyer is using.
Tell me more about that report that you the file that gets sent back. That's the next question I'm seeing. Folks are asking what information is in that report showing the invoices that are getting rebates. How detailed? What's in that report?
The report we're sending back to the buyer is going to detail
AP department. Right.
The AP department is going to detail the invoice amount, the date the invoice came in, that we paid the invoice, what discount we got on that invoice, and how much money is rebated on that discount is another report that will come out when we get paid on an invoice. Obviously, we can't predict, what rebate goes back to the buyer until we know when we're going to get paid back on the invoice that we paid for them. So it'll give all the pertinent information of that invoice for that particular vendor, and the dates and the pay dates, and whether it's ACH, whether it was a check, whatever the vendor wanted. So we'll have all that information. And that not only
right.
We'll have the information in the report, it'll actually have that.
Right.
They'll actually be able to see that online.
And that's important for a couple of different reasons, I think. I mean, one is obviously you want to be able to reconcile and resolve those issues. But that same report can also be utilized to go back to procurement to say, look, these are the early pay discounts you negotiated. Here's what we've been able to capture. Keep negotiating more, right? As new contracts come up for renewal, this is now something that we're able to pursue and capture a larger and larger piece of. If you're trying to use this to justify automation and other investments to drive greater AP efficiency, this now helps to drive that business case, and to be able to capture all that in one place in a report like that, I think is incredibly valuable. All right, Steve, I got someone trying to poke a hole in all this. So if the person says, I understand that you're spending all this time going out to the vendors, learning about them, negotiating with them. What happens if at the end of the day they decide not to sign up for early pay discounts? Is there some sort of fee? How do you get reimbursed for the time wasted? Is there a fee?
We don't get reimbursed for the time wasted. Traditionally, we're able to convert about 20%. So that those rebates in the 20% actually is enough to pay us, for that. There's also another benefit that we have in this. This becomes a networking effect for us, in that if we get a vendor and a vendor likes what we're doing, they're going to introduce us to other people, their buyers. So we could wind up, having one customer sign up and get 3 or 4 or 5 other customers out of it. So this becomes, beneficial to us. So we're very happy to work as hard as we can with the, to get those vendors on to make it work for the buyer, because we know that this is going to be a network effect that we eventually believe that, in 5 to 10 years, early pay will be how people are paying. You're not going to see a lot of financing, even factoring. You're not going to, factoring has been diminishing for years now anyway, because the large Fortune 500 have been doing early pay, and the large Fortune 500 invoices have disappeared from the marketplace for factors to utilize those. And there was a reason for that. There's risk in factoring. If you're a buyer that's working with somebody who is factoring, you could wind up having a double payment risk if you don't pay the right person on time. That a lot of the companies have gotten burned where they've accidentally paid the client back. That money never got to the factor, and then they wind up getting sued. So early pay eliminates all of that. So if you have any buyers that are listening who are factoring, if you offer early pay to any of those vendors, they're going to grab it. They're going to just say, tell their factor to go away, and they'll accept the early pay from you.
Based on your experience talking with the AR side of the shop, I'm wondering if you're hearing the same thing we are. So our baseline is about the same, both what you shared and what I've been studying in our benchmarking data as well, which is about 1 in 5 or 20% of vendors accepting early pay. Have you seen any change in that? Do you anticipate any change in that number, up or down, going forward?
Well, it actually does go up and down now, depending on the industry. We mentioned that it's 20%, but we do multiple types of industries. In the transportation industry, we see that number approaching 30%. Some service industries, we see that coming down closer to 16%. So it does go, it goes up and down, but I think you're going to find that you're going to get more and more in general. That number's going to creep up because more and more people are getting close to getting early pay programs. Think about the 1950s when credit cards came around. Maybe there were 5% of businesses that accept credit cards. Today it's 90% of businesses accept credit cards, especially in the retail industry. It's 100%. Nobody's going to open a store without accepting credit cards anymore. So you'll see as the industry matures, you'll see that 20% go to 30, 40, 50%. And I think that being companies like us who can actually still provide the terms and the money can keep the cash flow going because, if you pay your 20% early, and you stretch out your 80% a little bit longer. And I said, if you pay your 20% in 7 days, and you take your 80% who are not giving you a discount, and going from 45 to 60 or 60 to 75, your cash flow stays the same, but you're actually making money. That's into your organization.
Excuse me. That jives with what I'm hearing as well. The other factor, in addition to the industry splits you're talking about, is to what effect we see changes in interest rates. And I don't think either of us sitting here are able to make any kind of big macroeconomic projections on the state of the economy, but interest rates have been fairly low, and so it wouldn't be surprising if they're not always this low. And what I've been told from folks on the AR side of the shop is the higher interest rates go, the more attractive early pay discounts become, right? Because they can't go out in the open market and borrow money at 2%. They're more than willing to go out and extend a 2% discount or whatever the standard term is. Your number was a little bit lower, but 1.5 to 2% it becomes increasingly attractive. And so, not only I think at 20% are you able to convert from a cost center to a profit center, but as your vendors become more open to early pay discounts, whether it's because of industry needs or because of changes in interest rates, it's going to become even more of a profitable opportunity for AP departments. Another question, just trying to sort of poke a hole in your model a bit. So the attendee is saying, all right, so I get that if I pay you, I get a sliding scale of that discount back. But what if I'm late in paying you? What happens then? Is there a penalty? What are the credit terms I have in reimbursing you when you've already outlaid the money?
Sure. Yes, we do have an interest rate if it's late, and that is when we work with a buyer and a seller on a program, we decide what is the needs of the buyer, what is the need of the seller. So we try to make the discount to a point where the buyer can pay late and still not cost them anything. You get to the end of it, and we're looking at usually 40 days, and there's no rebate left on a discount. Now, if we can get a little bit higher, we can get to 60 days, and there's no rebate. But if we get that earlier, but what we try to encourage the buyer to really think about the fact that 20% of the vendors, they can make money. 80%, they are not getting anything in the way of discount. So if they can't pay a bill, they should stretch out the ones that are not giving them a discount and try to make more consistency in that. If they feel they can always make 45 days, we'll pick 45 days. If they feel they can make 60, you pick 60. But if you give that early pay discount and you blend them both together, you wind up, you can still make money and keep your cash flow either neutral or even extended better. The Fortune 500 have become famous with that. There's a large cosmetic company that we do business with that has stretched the vendors out to 180 days. We started with them, they were at 45 days. Over 3 years, they have gone to 180 days. But in order to do that, they have offered an early pay program. We have a large electronics company. I mean, they've been in business for 100 years. They are standard 120-day pay. And, of course, so they can keep the supply chain going, they are offering an early pay discount. There's a large pharmaceutical company right now that wants to extend out their terms. And we've told them, if you extend the terms out, and they've already experienced that, where vendors are calling up screaming, saying, we can't do business with you anymore. And we've right. told them that if they offer an early pay discount, they can keep those vendors and still get the terms that they want.
With just a couple minutes left, I want to try to do a speed round for the last couple of questions, and then any questions we don't have time for, we'll have our contact information up, and we'll get to those questions via email after the event. So just real quick, obviously vendor information is incredibly sensitive. What's the security protocol that you guys have to keep it secure?
Yeah, we have. I'm not the tech person in this, but we do have a way to encrypt all the data that comes through, and we have where we store the data is all encrypted and secured. So we do have security on the vendor data. Usually, what people are worried about is the security going into their ERP. And being that we do not ask to go into their ERP or get access to their ERP, there's no security issues around that. And that's usually where your IT department is really concerned with anybody trying to get into the ERP. But we do have the security protocols, and any customer that comes to us, we'll disclose those to them.
The last question I'm going to take a stab at, try to give you a 30-second answer if you want to add to it, but then, honestly, this is the kind of question that we could spend an entire hour on. And the question is simply, deceptively simple, who should be negotiating terms? Is it procurement or AP? The quick answer is going to be yes. And I think what's great about one of the advantages of what we're talking about here is that this gives a great opportunity for AP and procurement to work together. There's some natural friction between those two functions, even though they're part of the same procure-to-pay process. And so, typically early pay terms are negotiated by procurement. Procurement tends to want to keep AP at arm's reach, but the best organizations, best practice is absolutely for AP and procurement to onboard vendors together and to discuss terms, both early pay terms, payment terms, how they want to get paid, what format, and then who their contacts are, both on the procurement and AP side. Anything quickly you want to add to that, Stephen?
Sure, I see it differently. As for early pay terms, we encourage that we do the early pay terms. What the procurement department wants to do is get their best price possible. Over time, somebody that's going to get an early pay, they're going to say, hey, I'm just going to price this into the deal if you're going to ask me an early pay. And you see that if you go to a store sometimes and say, well, if you use your American Express card, I'm going to charge you another 3%. So, we encourage that a third party going there after the deal is signed and after the invoices are in there asking for a discount, you're going to get your best value.
Great. Well, with that, I want to turn it back over to Laura for some final housekeeping.
Thank you, Stephen and Jess, for a great webinar today. I do have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we officially close out. Many of you have asked about the on-demand materials. please note everyone will receive an email within the next 2 business days with a link to today's live webinar to play back on demand, as well as a PDF of today's presentation. So please look for that email with those links within 2 business days. Also, if you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear once you close out of the webinar. This will help us in building future webinars, so your feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you again to Stephen and Jess for a great presentation today, and thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out of your busy day to join us. This webinar was brought to you by IOFM and sponsored by AeroPay Express. Thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.